Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. Last time on our last couple of videos, we took this 79 motor apart. Now this is a 1979 74-inch Shovelhead. I was kind of surprised when I took it apart and found out it was a 74-incher instead of an 80, but it seems Harley made 74-inchers right up through 1980. So let's talk about this thing. Tonight is more of a show and tell than usual because what I'd like to do is show what we've done to this point so we can, in the next couple videos, finish it up. Maybe the next one video finish it up. At any rate, in the last videos we took the top end off, we took the cam chest apart, and what we found was that although the lower end appeared to be just fine, the wrist pin bushings were a real loose fit. Now this happens on these older motors and I'm really not sure why, but anytime you're putting a top end together, it pays to check those wrist pin bushings. Now, according to Harley Davidson, they want the wrist pin to fit with a nice light hand press fit. And there it is. That's a beautiful fit. It doesn't rock and it fits beautifully. So we replaced the wrist pin bushings, which by the way takes some very specialized tooling, and unless you have that tooling, that's something you should let somebody do who does it all the time. But that's what I did. The wrist pin bushings are in and done, fitted to the pistons. Everything has been scrubbed to within an inch of its life. Even if you're building a rat bike, which is fine by me, but the inside of that motor, all the workings need to be as clean as humanly possible. So the next thing is clean up the pistons. We mic the cylinders, and the cylinders show absolutely no wear. They have a 20,000th overbore in them. They were just as nice as could be. So again, scrubbed, cleaned, blasted, and painted these cylinders, cleaned up the pistons, got a new set of rings, and the next step, of course, is to fit the piston rings to the cylinders. Now, in doing so, let me see if I can show this here. Now, we've done a really nice honing pattern on the cylinder wall. Can you see that, Fred? A nice cross hatch in there for breaking in the new rings. And we're using pistons and rings that are very much like the original. These are original type cast pistons. Now, in order to set the ring gap on these, it has to be measured. So you set the piston ring in, you go below the ridge that's normally there, and you use some sort of a measuring device, like this little rule here, to make sure that the ring is set evenly all the way around. Then with a feeler gauge, you check the end gap of that piston ring. The book calls out 10 to 20 thousandths end gap. And here we have 14. Now, to me, that's close. That's good enough for me. It's halfway between the limits of the factory specifications. So now we have a cylinder that's finished. We have the pistons all cleaned up. The wrist pin bushings are done. Now, if you look inside these original cast pistons, I say original. I believe this is an aftermarket piece, but it is identical to the original Harley piston. It has the steel support in it. But this mark right here, this little ridge, this should be on the gear side of the motor. In other words, the business side, where the cam and everything else in here, all your timing gears, this mark here is to face that. Now, I've marked these pistons front and rear. They're going back in as they came out. I've got one snap ring in there, and the wrist pin will go in from this side after being oiled well and will be in place. Now, when you put the piston rings on, and there's tools for There's tools for every operation you can think of, and I have the tools. Still being an old timer, I generally put the piston rings on with my fingers. I put them on carefully. I set the end gaps 120 degrees apart. And that's the way it's done. Want to oil the skirts. Want to oil the cylinder wall lightly. I might also add, before doing that, the final cleaning is done by wiping the inside of the cylinder bore. I use white paper towels and alcohol. A lot of guys use lacquer thinner. But the idea is you wipe the inside of that cylinder until that white paper towel comes out clean. And that's the reason for doing it like that, till everything is clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Well worth the effort. So that takes care of the wrist pin bushings, the cylinders, the pistons. Like I said, we mic'd these cylinders to make sure there was no wear in them. This thing had been rebuilt not too long before it was parked. We're just freshening it up. That takes care of the cylinders and pistons. The next thing is the cylinder heads themselves. Now, I don't know, maybe I'll just move this over here. I think it might work a little better for you, Fred. Let me see if I can just get a couple things out of the way. And here is the front cylinder head. Again, cleaned up to within an inch of its life. The valves were in good shape. It had new guides in it. So with a ball hone, I cleaned those up to make sure they were clean and had a nice crosshatch in them to transfer oil to the stems. Cleaned the valves. Now, in cleaning these valves, I usually do them on a wire wheel. And doing them on a wire brush wheel cleans the face here of the valve. And when you do the back, you want to be real careful. You don't want a wire brush where the valve meets the seat. Now you can clean right to there even, where it's usually caked up with carbon. The only thing is you don't want to hit this stem with that wire wheel. Once that's done, then you can hand lap this valve to its seat. I don't know if you can see the pattern on there, but there's about a 60,000th wide seat. Now, a lot of people are going to ask about it. Most people put 3-angle valve seats on them, which is the modern way to do it, and I think it's a wonderful thing to do. However, this is all original with 45-degree seats, and that's the way we're doing it because it's original. One other important thing to check out on the cylinder heads is shovelhead cylinder heads and pan heads. They have inserts cast right into the head for the head bolts. Now, after the heads have been on and off a few dozen times, which they tend to be, the first thread can pull down and keep the head from seating perfectly. If you've got metal that's protruding out as far as the head surface here, take it to a machine shop and have them mill them down about 60 thousandths. If you do that, you won't have a problem blowing head gaskets. Another question I had asked of me the other day, I get a lot of emails, which is real flattering. I do appreciate those emails, and I try to answer every one that I possibly can. I might also add there have been some really nice emails from all over the world, and I'm kind of thrilled to get them. It feels good. But one of the things I was asked was why I use the multi-layer head gasket as opposed to a single layer. I've worked on these things for a lot of years, and whenever something comes along that I think is better than anything I've had before, that's what I start using. That's really the answer. My old Shovelhead was my test bench for parts for years and years. And most of the things that you see me using, all of the things you see me using, I generally have tested on my Shovelhead. Okay, that pretty much covers it. I can't go any further until the aluminum parts come back from the polisher. That would be the rocker boxes, the cam cover, the oil pump. What else? Oh, the end cover for the transmission. The transmission's another story. But we'll be putting the rest of this back together soon. And I hope I've answered a few questions here. If not, maybe I'll get them in my email. Anyway, like I said, next step we'll be putting the rest of it together. I'd like to take a moment and say, if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. All you have to do is hit that button on the screen. And when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time a new video comes out from us. So until then, see you out on the road.